expressionist, I started throwing gobs of colored pulp around, and it was very wet, and I'd take the hose and I'd spray it, and just to see what would happen. I did an awful lot of experimenting, but I found that only a certain portion of what I did was really satisfying, and I had to just simply destroy a lot. And I've got an awful lot of failed pieces lying around. And then I thought, well, maybe this is, I called one piece a tapestry, and I thought to myself, this is kind of like weaving. And so I thought maybe if I was more methodical in the way I went about it, I could control the outcome somewhat. And yet it's still, you know, you have to imagine what color you want next, to use next, and so forth. So there's still an element that's unplanned. But that's what makes it interesting. In paper making, there are two schools of thought. One is work with pulp fibers that are natural and don't alter the color. Use the natural color. There's a big school of paper makers who go by that kind of purist philosophy. But mine is more painterly. I got involved in paper making as a printmaker because I was interested in the surface of the paper for printmaking. And little by little, I came to realize how brilliant the color can be when you're working with linen rag pulp. So the way I work is with a cotton base. This gray, this uninteresting gray, is the cotton base. And to that, I laminate all these brilliant colors. And I got involved with this rather regimented imagery because I was looking through a book of Paul Klee's work, and I thought to myself, this would really translate beautifully into paper. So this is actually an image that I purloined from Paul Klee. It was a small little watercolor of his. But it lends itself to all kinds of color juxtapositions. So I started calibrating the color, working with related colors, families of color, and trying to really make them as brilliant as possible. And that has a soft line here, but if I want a stricter line, a harder line, I can just lay a piece of string down, like so, and come in with the next color. So it could be anything. But I'm trying to do this very gradually in order to have them work together. The color is all intuitive. I mean, you can see I've graduated these colors. I'm going from a pale bluish purple to a kind of reddish orange. But I didn't know that I was going to use these colors when I started the piece. It's one color leads to the next. And I mix as I go along. But I'm looking at another piece that I did. I'm doing a series of these, so I have 2 done. This is the 3rd one. And I'm trying to have the whole series be a very subtly calibrated progression, somewhat like a progression. You know, if you get up early in the morning and you see the sunrise, and it starts very intense, and then sort of washes out gradually. The opposite happens in a sunset. You know, it starts out kind of bleached out and then it intensifies as time goes on. Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to do in this little progression of pieces. I do get kind of lost. I like that. I like getting lost. Get kind of in a zone, and that's good. That's the way you want to be. That's when you're really cooking, when you're in a zone. I'm going to fill in this area and this area simultaneously, these two areas. It's just a simple progression from working from the outside into the center. And I haven't decided this area is going to have another color family. And these two areas are going to be a repetition of the outside. So I pretty well know what I'm going to do. I mean, it's just a matter of doing it slowly and judiciously, you know, calibrating the color carefully so that the colors sing. If I produce something that I think is a problem, then I'll experiment with it. If I'm not happy with something, I'll stitch, and I think stitching and, you know, sewing is related to this. I mean, you're using fibers. Anything that's related can be used. I even use printed papers. Sometimes I incorporate printed things in. Sort of collage. You can collage with this medium. You know, you can take bits and pieces of things. I have some leftover wool threads that I used to knit, and I have a lot of wool yarn left over that was really beautiful, nubby, and, you know, beautiful colors. So I simply take that yarn and dip it into the pulp, and gets coated, and it binds nicely with what's already down. It's the little fibers of pulp that, you know, stick to one another in this wet state. When I'm finished, I take everything off the table except the piece, and I lay 2 layers of sheeting, plastic sheeting on them, and I have a little vacuum canister that's just it's a wet and dry vacuum, and I just turn that on, and there's a lot of suction. It pulls a lot of the water out of this piece, and I have tucked in some little pieces of straw here on the ends, which you don't see, but once the vacuum suction takes place, that texture that's sandwiched underneath will become apparent. So that's another element, is embedding a texture between sheets of the cotton pulp. So that's something you don't see, but is in the piece. And in the winter, there's nothing happening, and so that's a great time to do work. There are very few distractions, and I like it. I like that. The summers are kind of mad and crazy because we get a lot of visitors, but it's nice to take a break then. If you've worked all winter and some of the spring and in the fall, in the summer you can afford to do little and enjoy being outside and so forth. I like being known as a paper maker, but there's a huge variation among paper makers. And I have one frustration, and that is that people look at the work and have no idea how it's done. They say, well, that's handmade paper, but did you paint it? You know, they really have no concept that it is wet on wet pulp. And that's frustrating because it shouldn't be compared to painting. It's kind of like a craft. I think of it as kind of a craft and kind of an art, kind of mixed. And I have no problem with craft label. That's fine. I'm definitely compelled to do this. If I didn't do this, I would be neurotic. I think I would have problems. I think my family would have problems because I was having problems, and it's just very rewarding, very rewarding.